So we're going to have some fun today. They told us we had to do a panel on Hillary Clinton. And we have two experts here, Alexander Marlowe from Breitbart.com and Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch, which is one of the best organizations here in Washington.
Thank you.
And so, unfortunately, due to time constraints, we had to come up with only 7 of Hillary Clinton's deadly sins, which actually fits beautifully with the 7 deadly sins. So I'm going to gloss over them really quick. We're going to talk about the Clinton Foundation. Alex is going to talk about Hillary Clinton's binders full of women, which should be interesting. The email scandal, Benghazi, the speaking fees, what happened in the 1990s and before, particularly the Whitewater incident, and just the fact that when most Americans think of Hillary Clinton, they use the word liar. So we're going to touch on all of those things. And I'm going to ask a question to the audience. Do you know why Hillary Clinton uses 2 planes when she lands in an airport? 1 plane for her entourage, another plane for her baggage. So with that, we're going to start. So the Clinton Foundation. We all hear about recently, you know, the Schweitzer book came out last summer. There's a lot of noise going around there. Why don't you kick us off? What's going on with the Clinton Foundation? What's the litigation around that?
Well, the Clinton Foundation is part of the Clinton operation. And when she came into the State Department, she promised she was going to run all the conflicts of interest by the ethics officers there. Well, guess what? Everything that she and her husband did were blessed. Her husband makes $48 million in speaking fees from everybody and their mother. The Chinese, the Saudis, every major corporation in the United States, $48 million into their personal bank accounts. And of course, you had the Clinton Foundation, which had its tendrils into the State Department. Sidney Blumenthal, Clinton Foundation, they're raising billions while she's there from the same people who wanted favors from the government. And we all know about the investigation into the emails, but the reports are those 150 FBI agents are also looking into how she used the State Department to benefit herself and the foundation, which was their political platform, right. Not really anything charitable. Billions in graft, fraud, and abuse, right. It looks like, and this is as important as everything else we're talking about.
And Alex, do you want to touch on how some of these countries may have been, you could say, greasing the wheel in anticipation of her becoming President of the United States, using the Clinton Foundation as almost an international political slush fund, if you want to touch on that?
Yeah, there's countless examples. My personal favorite was actually Kazakhstan, which is something you should read about in Clinton Cash, by Peter Schweitzer, who's a Breitbart editor, and he runs an organization called GAI. But I think the one that people touched on the most was covered in a 4,000-word article in the noted right-wing publication, the New York Times, where they pointed out that Hillary actually transferred 20% of the United States uranium to Putin's Russia as shareholders in a deal that sent the Clinton Foundation $145 million, ladies and gentlemen. That is the Clintons auctioning the national security and precious resources of the United States of America to the highest bidder. In this case, it was Putin's Russia. If that is not a deadly sin, I don't know what is.
Now, is there an ongoing investigation into the Clinton Foundation? Is that still pending?
That's all part of this. It's all part. Sure. The Clinton emails they're looking at. What are the emails about? What was she trying to hide? They say their cover-up is worse than the crime. Not necessarily. There was a crime to cover up. And the Clinton Foundation, that personal money that she was getting through her husband from these speaking fees, can you imagine a Secretary of State's husband going around getting paid by foreign governments at the time she's Secretary of State? And not the innocent foreign governments and their fronts, but the Chinese, the Saudi Arabians, and even companies like Boeing. It is an outrage, and the FBI is trying to say how much money came in and what happened in the State Department after the money came in. And it's as serious a criminal liability as the classified mishandling of the information that we're going to talk about later.
And so Alex, you and I also talked, we're going to the second one, which is now...
Can I wrap up? Well, one more thing with that, which is a key connective tissue with all the Clintons, and everything they do, and we'll talk about this probably in just about every deadly sin we touch on, is their serial dishonesty. And we can focus on this later, but she did swear that she would disclose all the contributions to the Clinton Foundation. As of now, and again, another right-wing outlet, the Washington Post, says that 1,100 donations are so far not disclosed. This is a woman who thinks of the truth as anything that is politically expedient for her. Her husband's the same way, and that's the danger of putting them back in the White House.
Absolutely. So to throw it right back at you, to move on to the second one, we talked about Hillary Clinton's involvement in some of, let's just say, Bill Clinton's extracurricular activities. And we kind of joked around she has these binders full of women that she has intimidated and that she has personally threatened. I think you have a list or something you might want to run through?
Yeah, Hillary Clinton tweeted earlier this year, every survivor of sexual assault deserves to be heard, believed, and supported. Okay, well, here are the names of some of the women who have accused Bill Clinton of something similar. Kathleen Willey, sexual assault. Connie Hamzy, sexual harassment. Juanita Broderick, rape. She says that Hillary threatened her personally. Eileen Wellstone, sexual assault. Sandra Allen James, sexual assault. Christy Zurcher, sexual assault. A 22-year-old anonymous Yale student, sexual assault. A University of Arkansas student, sexual assault. You're starting to learn patterns about Bill Clinton here.
Right.
Paula Jones, sexual harassment and character assassination. That case was settled. Monica Lewinsky, character assassination, and Jennifer Flowers, character assassination. Jennifer Flowers, in particular, claimed that Hillary actually ran a war room against her in 1992. Is this her abiding by her own doctrine that all sexual assault survivors need to be believed, heard, and supported, ladies and gentlemen? Absolutely not. She's the worst advocate for the war on women possible because she's the one who threw down with Bill and tried to defend him and enable him.
What? The Judicial Watch represented we represented Kathleen Willey, we represented Jennifer Flowers and Paula Jones and Juanita Broderick. And I have zero patience for those who kind of laugh about his dalliances. And few people know this, but the Clintons, while they were in the White House, had private investigators working for them. And they were not investigating people's names and addresses. They were there to intimidate witnesses against them, including the women. And many of the representations I talked about were for their women who were audited by the Clinton IRS. In the case of Kathleen Willey, they had leaked files that were protected by the Privacy Act. And you know who was involved in the leaking of that files? Not just Bill, but Hillary. She approved it. The court found that she was involved. They admitted it to her. They admitted it to the court. So Mrs. Clinton personally was using the offices of the presidency, her husband's presidency, to go after the women critics of her husband. And Kathleen Willey, again, talked about an assault in the White House. And the response from Mrs. Clinton was to say it's okay for the government to release a file on her to make her look bad.
And one other thing, and just to update this story, is that she hasn't learned her lesson. That you guys may know that she's struggling with the millennial vote right now, Hillary Clinton. Bernie Sanders, an aged white socialist who's barely even a Democrat, is somehow, come on, he's an elderly guy. He's inspirational, but he has tapped into the younger generation better than Hillary. So who did Hillary tap as her millennial spokesperson? Lena Dunham, who falsely accused a Republican of rape and had to make a correction to her best-selling book because of it. This is someone who has a serious problem when women are involved in sexual harassment.
Right.
Now, we're going to move on to the third. Now, Tom, you run Judicial Watch, which everyone should give a round of applause for the work that they do to continue to investigate. Our third deadly sin that we're going to really focus on is the email scandal. And I travel all across the country and people say, is she going to get indicted? What's going on? Can you first just give us an update, talk about the work Judicial Watch has done to help make this process actually happen and get these books opened, and then just talk about the status of this investigation.
You know, back in 2014, we saw these Benghazi documents that got the select committee appointed. We wondered where Hillary Clinton's emails were, so we were suing and pushing. We said, where did you look for the records to the State Department? And then they start saying, well, there are other records out there. And they tell the court that. And 3 weeks later, we learned in the New York Times that Hillary Clinton, when she came into office, set up a separate email server to conduct all of her government business and told no one about it. And you might imagine the courts aren't terribly happy about it. And so Judicial Watch has been pursuing this, and just 2 weeks ago, we were authorized to conduct discovery. We're going to get testimony from current and former State Department officials So I don't know what the FBI is doing, and we may never know what the FBI is doing, but you can count on us to ask these questions, and you're going to know the answers because you have a right to know. And one thing we've learned is you can't rely on the government to get to the bottom of this. And it's no coincidence that we get authorized to start talking to people, that the FBI says, hey, guess what? We want to talk to people too. So we're pushing this, and it's independent investigations from Judicial Watch and the media that are pushing this story forward. The big story with Mrs. Clinton is the missing emails that she hasn't turned over. Where are they? And we're going to get them. And the classified information that she mishandled and left on the equivalent of an internet park bench. I'm convinced that a prosecution is forthcoming. I don't see how she gets away with it, but worse things will have happened. And no matter what the FBI does, we're going to get to the bottom of it because the courts want the answers on behalf of the American people.
Now, Alex, I know Breitbart's been covering this extensively, and it's kind of a strange timeline. She did that really awkward press conference at the UN, and she said she used the emails. She had a separate server because she didn't want two devices. Yeah. First, can you just list all of the inaccuracies of her cover-up of this, and coupled with just the illegal essence of it?
You know, I don't know if I have all the inaccuracies off the top of my head. Those are too numerous. Yeah, but you can distill this one down to common sense. Why would you have a secret email server? To hide stuff. You don't need it if you're not going to hide stuff. So Hillary says, I never sent or received any classified emails. So far, I think the tally is somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 classified emails that we know existed. You're seeing a pattern here with the lying. And so that's what this is all about, is that we're not going to get full information from her ever, because I'm starting to think she's pathological. She might not know when she's telling the truth and when she doesn't.
Absolutely. And so Tom, how do you see this happening before the election, in an election year? Do you think it changes, or how do you see this proceeding, especially with your involvement?
Mrs. Clinton has a political interest in hiding this information from the American people, and that shouldn't get in the way of law and order. Politicians can't use their campaigns to avoid accountability. She wants to get the presidency from Mrs. Clinton's position, I think, is a get-out-of-jail-free card. And that can't be allowed to stop prosecutors from proceeding, and it's not going to stop the courts from proceeding. And we're going to be taking testimony over the next few months. Mrs. Clinton may or may not be on the list, depending on how things go, but Cheryl Mills will be on the list. Huma Abedin is on the list. Obama administration officials still in the State Department are on the list. And the judge in our case, Judge Sullivan, said he was interested in subpoenaing every email on Hillary Clinton's server.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on to the fourth deadly sin, which we wanted to make sure we had plenty of time with, and something that has been of discussion, and that is Benghazi. And so,
Benghazi.
Tom, we'll start with you. I've heard in the media that, this has been litigated, this has been talked about, Hillary Clinton went in front of a panel. Obviously, the mainstream media narrative was that, she hit a home run, which is just sick to even describe that, and when you're talking about 4 dead Americans and an embassy burned down. Could you tell us, from a purely legal standpoint, where she might be in a predicament, and also how you feel the Benghazi proceedings have been going on, and Judicial Watch's involvement in the original investigation of how she actually traced the talking points?
Well, we asked for where did the Benghazi lies begin, those talking points, and we found they began in the White House. Congress didn't find it, we did. And now there's a select committee because of that. And that led to the email uncovering, because we were pushing for more information from the Clinton gang on that. And when I'm looking at all the documents from Benghazi, we've looked at them all. And where did this big lie about the fake internet video and the spontaneous demonstration as opposed to the Al-Qaeda attack occur? Where did it begin? With Mrs. Clinton. It began with Mrs. Clinton. And we just had a document come out a few weeks ago. They were offered special operations forces at a time that they could have been used to rescue some of the men who were killed. And no one took them up on the offer. And it was the State Department that was offered this. So Mrs. Clinton's accountability on this still needs to be vetted. We don't know what emails were missing. Our pressure, the State Department said, after they turned over all the emails to the Benghazi Select Committee, we said, well, what about other emails? They said, oh, wait, there are other emails. We don't know what emails Mrs. Clinton has withheld. This story is not over. And when people say it's been litigated, ask the families of the 4 victims, some of whom were lied to directly by Mrs. Clinton, whether they think it's been litigated.
Absolutely. And so Alex, what do you make of the Benghazi proceedings and the discussions surrounding it? Because it seemed there was an aggressive push by the GOP Oversight Committee in Congress. And so what is your take on that?
First of all, this ties nicely into the kind words you said about Judicial Watch, because sometimes I wish it was Judicial Watch in those hearings and not the Republicans, who somehow buried the best testimony 8 hours in. I don't know how that happened. But I think Tom Fitton could get those guys organized. But he's correct, Tom's correct in noting that this starts in the White House, and the whole Libya fiasco can be traced personally to Hillary Clinton, because she sold the Obama administration essentially a bill of goods that there was a genocide going on in Libya. It was going to be a cakewalk if we enter war there. It was going to look good. Gaddafi died, and then all of a sudden, what happened was Benghazi. And so we let it go by the wayside when Gaddafi was out of the picture. So let me get into some more lies. She is still blaming to this day the YouTube video, though she admitted to Egypt that it had nothing to do with the video, that it was an organized event. It was not around a protest. It was something that was a planned terror attack the day after it occurred. She knew on day one, yet she repeated the lies to the families of the victims. How about another lie? She referred to, in this famous Benghazi testimony, she called Chris Stevens her personal friend. Well, Ambassador Stevens did not have Hillary's personal email address, but her top national security advisor, Sidney Blumenthal, did, however. So she also claimed that everything was done, everything possible had been done, yet we know now that she decided not to send help for X amount of hours. It is just top to bottom a huge embarrassment that for any Republican would be the end of their career, and yet Hillary is this close to the White House.
You know, just quickly, Benghazi is about ISIS, because what happened in Libya was Muammar Gaddafi was allowed to be murdered by Obama administration with the support of Hillary Clinton. It turned Libya into a rat's nest for terrorists and al-Qaeda, leading to the attack on our embassy, the first murder of the American ambassador in the line of duty since Afghanistan. They didn't want to admit that in the midst of the presidential campaign. And ISIS now is in Benghazi, or in Libya generally, in large numbers. So if you want to know what may have sparked the war with respect to ISIS, Libya, Benghazi, that attack, it's a nightmare all around.
And Alex, I want you to go back to something about how all these scandals are interrelated. Emails, Benghazi, and the consistent absolute betrayal of the law, and how these are all intertwined. They're not necessarily exclusive. They're actually interwoven together. It's
a great point, Charlie, to focus on that, because that is the essence of this conversation that we're having today, is you're not going to remember every bullet point that Tom and I mention. Hopefully you'll go to Judicial Watch and you'll go to Breitbart. But the thing is that it is a pattern, and it's not going to stop. The Clintons do think they're above the law. I'm completely convinced they can't tell what's a lie and what's the truth. They only care about themselves, and they're going to continue to cut every corner to try to squeeze every dollar they can for themselves, and there's no evidence to the contrary. And that's what this is all about, is the connective tissue that is the Clintons, and that is dishonesty and willing to do anything that helps them, even if it harms the American people.
Now, moving on to the fifth deadly sin, her speaking fees. It was released, I think, a year and a half ago when Hillary Clinton went to go speak at UCLA and many of these other colleges. She would receive almost $500,000 for a 30-minute speech, an honorarium that was absolutely grotesque and outrageous. And additionally, it has come out, in some part thanks to the incessant yelling and screaming of Bernie Sanders, I don't know when he's not yelling and screaming, about her Goldman Sachs speeches. This almost pay-to-play, using honorariums in return for political favors. So what do you make of her? I don't think Goldman learned anything when she went there and spoke. It was obviously some sort of trading of favors. And what speaking fees in particular?
Well, you know, if you were given $500,000 to speak, would you go to a company that gave you $500,000 and criticize them? No, I think you'd be very nice to them, wouldn't you? The Goldman Sachs issue began during her tenure as Secretary of State. She was making money from her husband from Goldman Sachs, so they were paying her husband first. It goes to their bank account. They are married, remember. And then she gets off and she gets out of the State Department and gets the money directly. If Mrs. Clinton was committed to transparency, these speeches would be released. And the only thing that is preventing them from being released is her say-so. What is embarrassing about it? If it was a straightforward speech, she would release it. If it was helpful, she would release it. you can presume it's unhelpful because it shows that it is pay to play.
Hillary Clinton is one of the least interesting speakers in America. Think about it. We know exactly what she's going to say, which is absolutely nothing. I watched her last stump rally. She literally called for a campaign of love and kindness. I say, how brave is that? Thank you, Hillary. You're for love and kindness. And then she said, well, we're not going to make America great again. We're going to make America whole again. Wow, that's some deep stuff. You're not paying $500,000 for that. You're paying for access, ladies and gentlemen. That's what it's all about.
And that's what the FBI is investigating. They're not just the emails, but these speeches and the access. These companies aren't stupid. They paid to play. They paid to have a seat at the table, because our experience with Mrs. Clinton from the Clinton years on is that if you didn't have a seat at the table, you were going to be there for dinner, meaning a part of the meal.
And now the sixth one we're going to talk about. See, now what Hillary Clinton's going to try to do is try to sweep all this under the rug. But what I think is important is to go back in her history, specifically with the Whitewater investigation, and show this is a lifelong pattern of avoidance of the law and absolute pathological lying. So you want to talk about the documents that Judicial Watch found?
Yeah, I've affectionately referred to Mrs. Clinton as St. Hillary of the grand jury, the first lady to testify before a grand jury. And if the FBI and the Justice Department was working on an indictment of Mrs. Clinton, it wouldn't be the first time. We're fighting for the draft indictment from her Whitewater days, where she's accused of obstruction of justice, taking documents, remind you of anything? Hiding her relationships with a bank, remind you of anything? Mrs. Clinton would have been indicted but for Monica Lewinsky. And there ought to be a statute to Monica Lewinsky in the Clinton Library, because it's the only thing that stood between her and an indictment and a jury and having to go before a jury of her peers. There's no doubt that prosecutors would have wanted to put her in jail, other than her being First Lady and the issues they had with Monica Lewinsky. And the government, the Obama administration, is saying the draft indictment should be withheld to protect Mrs. Clinton's privacy. Can you imagine?
I think this is one where we could probably do another panel just on the old school Clinton scandals. I'll just highlight one favorite, which is the travel offices, where she fired everyone in the travel offices of the White House and replaced them with her cronies. And that's something that you saw repeatedly throughout the Clinton years. But one little Jeopardy trivia for you guys. Did you know Hillary's the only First Lady to be fingerprinted by the FBI? Interesting. It's a good quality for president, too, I guess.
Well, and so on that note, and as we tie all of this together, in some way, you're starting to see the American people open their eyes. There was a poll done in August where it was a one-word association test, and they said, what's the first word that comes to mind when you hear Hillary Clinton? And they said liar. And people think she's phony and inauthentic. And so on that note, Tom, I'll start with you. This is an election year, and she's having to, in some ways, sidestep not just the current controversy of the email, Benghazi, and avoidance of the law, but all these past controversies. Is this something that the American people are starting to realize? And in this very, very important year, do you think that we're talking about her pattern of disruptive behavior enough?
The American people understand this. The question is, do the politicians understand it? Are they willing to show the leadership that you're seeing up here on these issues? My view is the debate about Mrs. Clinton is, why hasn't she been indicted? Not whether she can become the nominee for the Democratic Party, is, can she stay out of jail? That's the discussion we need to have. And the American people are tired of politicians who, because they're running for office, are treated like normal people, when in fact that she is subject to more FBI investigators and investigations than any mafia figure out there. And why aren't we talking about this in a more transparent way, that this is a person under criminal investigation, and it isn't outrageous that we're pretending she's just another politician running for office. We need to be protected from this lawlessness, not enable it.
Now, Alex, we just have about a minute remaining, and I deal with a lot of young people and organization, Turning Point USA. We're the red polos out there, so good to see all you guys. And whether it be Republican, Democrat, Independent, very few young people actually think Hillary Clinton is, as you say, honest or authentic. And I think, and personally, I think that's a good growing trend. Give us that 30-second closing argument that when anybody ever supports Hillary Clinton, you can just say this, this, and this, and then you can make them vastly reconsider the way they're looking at things.
Hillary is the face of Washington, D.C. She's the face of cronyism. She's the face of corruption. I become convinced Hillary Clinton doesn't make a facial expression without having a focus group to see if it's going to be effective. She's the most patently dishonest politician living in America today, and somehow she's become effective. But what's happening now, and this is not just Trump, it's not just Cruz, it's not just Sanders, but you're seeing these outsiders, these insurgents who detest Washington, get a backbone of support. A lot of it's coming from young people, and that is a relief to me, because it's time to throw out the Washington cronyist corporate class. That's a permanent political class, and it starts first and foremost with Hillary Clinton. She's the worst of them all.
Well, thank you so much. And those are the 7 deadly sins of Hillary Clinton. And with all of you, we will be here in November. Thank you.
Thank you.